Welcome, everybody, to our April webinar. This one should be pretty interesting. This one's a kind of a comparison between what a pen test does for you and other things that you can do as it specifically pertains to PKI. And I am your host, Brad Butlick. If you've been through a couple of webinars already, you've gotten used to me. I'm the Director of Sales here at PKI Solutions. And Mark Cooper is joining me. He probably doesn't need any introduction. Mark Cooper is the PKI guy. He's known worldwide for it. He's the president and founder of PKI Solutions, and he will be leading you through this next half an hour. And as history has shown, that these half an hour go rather fast. So I'm not going to waste any time and introduce you to Mark Cooper, the PKI guy, president and founder of this company, and talk to you a little bit about pen tests and how they might not be enough for what you're doing specifically on PKI. So Mark, take it away, and I'll be chiming in as necessary.
Great, thanks, Brad. And I would say that no, this is probably a great conversation beyond just what a pen test is or isn't, but kind of thinking about how organizations use pen tests. There's certainly a right role and a right thing they do, but like any kind of tool, if you're expecting a tool to do something it's not designed to do, you may be making some big assumptions. And we've actually, I have some really interesting anecdotes I want to share with just some things that we've been seeing lately. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's the role of pen tests, how PKI even kind of fits into the pen test, what they're good at, what they're not good at, and then what some of the risks that organizations are able to address and some that they're really kind of having challenges with. Probably a great place to start is we've got just a simple poll. I'm curious to see with our attendees how many of them are doing pen tests and how often they're doing pen tests. And frankly, some organizations aren't doing pen tests. There's no right or wrong answer for any single organization. I don't know that we necessarily see organizations doing pen tests more than once or twice a year. But it'd be interesting to see just how many organizations have them out there. So while we've got that poll open, let's talk a little bit about why assessments and pen tests exist and what they're really designed to do. And there is technically a distinction between an assessment and a pen test. What we see most enterprises working on is when they do an assessment, they're really talking about bringing maybe a subject matter expert, a consultant, or using some tools, looking at an infrastructure and trying to figure out what best practices are right, are things configured properly, are policies and procedures in place. It tends to be more of an ephemeral type of a review, not necessarily can I physically break something, can I manipulate something, is there an attack vector that I can exploit and demonstrate. That's kind of the role traditionally of a pen test is, can I target particular systems, processes, demonstrate exploitable weaknesses, document what those are, show a customer or client or an internal team what those things are, and how do we remediate those things. One of the problems with any of those things is they tend to be a snapshot in time. It's a point in time of today I did an assessment, last week I did a pen test. The moment that those tools are done and people stop looking, that information is immediately out of date. Because one, you don't necessarily know what the environment looks like after the assessment or after the pen test is completed. If you remediated something or you thought that you remediated it, you're making an assumption about that risk or vulnerability no longer being in the environment. The other thing is you don't necessarily know if something's been introduced new. If a malicious actor adds something tomorrow or a month from now, or a administrator makes an accidental misconfiguration or adds something in there, that isn't protected because you had a pen test last month. So one of the things that we often talk about is assessments and pen tests only tell you what's been wrong with your environment since the last test. That's all they're designed to do. It is more of a stopgap governance sort of thing of, here's how we determine if we have been secure. This is the way that we can verify. pen tests are not tools that help you stay secure. They're not designed to become a security tool to identify uh, that you're currently running securely. They are simply a way of, hey, how do we follow governance and show from a compliance perspective, from a regulatory perspective, to assert up to our executives that we're compliant. They don't actually do anything the moment that they are done. Whereas when we start looking at things like posture management, this is a new area where we take those same principles of, can we make sure that that firewall that's doing X, that PKI is supposed to be doing Y, those things, rather than waiting for that point in time and having constantly outdated information. Posture management is about, how do I get that same type of intelligence in real time? How do I tell at any moment when the vulnerability has been introduced, and then know when it's been removed, and then be able to detect if it comes back again? I'm not going to wait another 6 months or 12 months, or even looking at our poll results, that the most common, 40% of people say they only do a pen test when required by compliance. The 27% said once a year. So that means people are doing it only when they have to, or maybe once a year, and then a few are doing it more frequently. That means the information you're working with is constantly out of date, whereas posture management is the way of making sure in real time you're getting that visibility, and you're not just relying on the firewall saying, hey, we're up and running. You're not just relying on the PKI saying we're up and running, we must be secure.
Well, Mark, I think that also goes to the fact that when you think of a penetration test, it's a very old time term when most of the time people are concerned about whether the firewall is configured properly. Can I get in? That's what, when you think of a penetration test, can I get in? It doesn't take into consideration things like, is it secure? It's like PKI. You can have a PKI running, and it's doing its theoretically doing its job because there's no user that's complaining that I can't continue my work. But while it's running, is it secure? Or have I spent all this money, time, and effort implementing a solution that is insecure? So that's not necessarily a pen test at that point. It's not, can I get in? It's, is it secure?
And they definitely have morphed over time. In the old days, it was simply, hey, there's some hacking group. I'm going to see if they can get through my firewall. And now they're certainly very comprehensive. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with pen tests. To me, it's just a tool that is designed for a particular purpose. They don't make you secure. They are not a way of securing your organization. They should be the thing. And frankly, unless you have pen tests that every year come back and say you have no issues, then either the pen test isn't doing a good job, or you've got great tools that you are using on a daily basis to secure your infrastructure, that the pen test is saying, yes, you are secure because you're doing these other things. Which kind of brings us to the limitations when we kind of think about why do these things work and why they don't work. And I think there's been actually a really couple of interesting conversations that I've had just in the last couple of weeks with some of our customers, and even just people running PKIs. And one of them was around this concept of posture management, of real-time visibility versus pen test. And this was a very astute customer. And we were talking about whether there's a need for posture management and visibility. And their feedback was, we never have any problems with our pen test. It finds a few things here or there, and we're able to quickly fix it. You're one, on the surface level, you're essentially saying, we know we always have security issues, and we fix it when it's now. It's a little bit of, I'm only concerned about once the problem has been identified, as opposed to, wow, we keep having security things that pop up. Maybe we should find a way to be fixing these in real time, so that when the pen test does come, they say, yeah, you are indeed secure, nothing's popped up. So then I said, well, how do you feel about your PKI in these pen tests? Because one of the things that we have found is, for most organizations, the PKI is the soft underbelly that pen testers have now identified over the last couple of years, that they can almost always go find vulnerabilities. And I know when we work with organizations, we deploy Spotlight or whatever, it always lights up with Spectre ops or PT POTMs or template issues. it is a very challenging area where these security issues are. And this customer said, well, our pen testers have said that we haven't really had any issues with our PKI. There's been like a little template thing here or there. And through an interesting turn of conversation, I said, well, did they say anything about specific vulnerabilities? Meaning we looked for the 16 different Spectre ops and you had none of them. Or did the pen tester not even go look for this? Because this is one of the problems. When we start thinking about assessments and pen tests, if you simply wait for them to tell you if you're secure, is that pen tester actually looking for those specific vulnerabilities? So I'm going to put it to anyone watching this webinar, either live or recorded. If you haven't had issues with your PKI in your pen test, I would invite you to go look at your pen test report and see, did it specifically call out the 16 different Spectre Ops vulnerabilities? Did it call out petit potums and say, none found, none found? I would certainly feel much more comfortable if you said, we at least know that those are being looked at and none of those vulnerabilities were found. But if it just says PKI, no issues, there's no guarantee that they're actually looking at these vulnerabilities. It is a big black box. That is, again, the problem with relying on a compliance tool to keep you secure. Now, the other interesting thing that we've seen recently is a customer that did something really unique. And I actually posted about this on LinkedIn. It was a genius thing. Sometimes customers do interesting things. So we've seen great success with customers using Spotlight to remediate issues and passing their pen tests. In fact, we haven't had any customers have challenges with their pen tests that are running on Spotlight. This customer did something different. In their POC, we installed Spotlight, and of course it lit up. It found 12 Spectre Ops vulnerabilities in their PKI. And this customer, out of their own idea, which turned out to be genius, left the vulnerabilities there. They knew that Spotlight had identified them. They knew it was in their PKI, and they knew they had a pen test coming up. The pen testers came in, did the work, and you'll never guess how many vulnerabilities they found. They found one. Well, you know, Brad, you know this one. Yeah. They found one. And they said, we found one Spectre Ops vulnerability. So in that case, they knew the Spectre Ops were areas to find. And it's hard to find these things. It took us a long time to piece this together.
One more thing. This was a specific PKI vulnerability, a pen test. This wasn't just a generic pen test. This was a specific PKI pen test.
Yeah. So this was a really interesting way of looking at the problem, because think about it. With posture management and Spotlight, identifying those issues, if they had fixed them all and then had the pen tester come in, what would the pen tester have said? Oh, yeah, you have no problems with your PKI. It would have looked like everything was okay. Even our customer would have been confused, because it would have been, oh yeah, Spotlight did a great job, which we know it does. But then the result would have looked like the pen test is great and it doesn't have any issues, and would have said your PKI is fine. But by having these vulnerabilities left in the environment, when the pen testers came in and found one, highlighted the fact that the pen test was not a definitive way of solving these security things. From a governance perspective, it certainly showed that at least those tools or that process that pen tester was using, I know not all pen testers are the same, wasn't the right way. So there are real world issues around pen tests, even from a governance side. And as we go through this, I think another interesting thing to find out is, as we kind of talk about risks and vulnerabilities in the space, is what are some of your biggest concerns today with PKIs? And we'll open that poll, because I'm curious to see how people sleep at night with some of these. As we add new vulnerabilities, new best practices, then there's always challenges of, are the pen testers keeping up? Are the assessments keeping up? This is not a static thing. And I think what we're finding is, this move towards posture management is a need to keep things secure more frequently and more real time. Gone are the days of, hey, I know I can keep an attacker out of my firewall and I check it once a year, to I need to make sure these vulnerabilities, these security issues aren't in my environment. And remember, these vulnerabilities don't just come from some malicious actor who's in your environment as mucking with things. That is far down the threat profile for many customers. Where most of these vulnerabilities come from, out of the box configurations and customers following documentation, steps from manufacturers, information that they find on the website. It is accidental misconfiguration. And many of these vulnerability issues are just a simple click away. And the other conversation that came up in regards to this is not a Microsoft PKI thing. I was talking to a vendor today, when we talked about Spectre Ops exists because of templates and Active Directory and Entra and user IDs. The most prevalent method of authentication today. If you use PKI as a service, if you use DigiCert, Global Sign, Managed PKI, EJBC, it doesn't matter what is signing the certificate. They are all interfacing with Active Directory and using templates. That's where those vulnerabilities are. This is not I'm not on Microsoft PKI, I don't have a risk, which, by the way, when you go talk to many of these vendors, will say, oh, no, if you go to our managed PKI, you can move away from all of these threats and risks. Not the case. These types of specific vulnerabilities as it relate to lateral elevation and account exploits will exist inside of your authentication systems, regardless of what CAs are actually being used to sign. So it looks like the biggest concerns that we're seeing from customers, 38% are saying undetected vulnerabilities. That's the tough one, right? That what you don't know, the unseen, what is out there. So if you're not doing pen tests, if you are doing pen tests, do you have your confidence? And I hope I'm not ruining anyone's day by shaking your confidence in pen tests. We always see our role as making sure that you look at these risks with open eyes. And if your pen testers are saying, hey, we've looked at all these things and you trust your pen tester, great. We just want to advocate to moving towards more real time. If you don't have that clarity of whether your pen testers are seeing those things, then you should be asking. The second biggest concern, certificate expirations and downtime. A very common thing that affects a lot of systems out there, and unauthorized certificate issuance. So, vulnerabilities lead to certificate issuance. They can lead to denial of service. There's a lot of areas to watch out there. So what happens when you neglect your PKI? And I say this not just from, am I doing pen tests or not, but if you have a PKI that you're not managing, that you're not doing posture management, that you're not doing a pen test, whatever those things are, we call that neglected PKI. If you treat your PKI like a black box, someone stood it up, you stood it up, another team did it, you just look at something that gives you certificates, the odds are that's a neglected PKI. If you're not doing pen tests, if you're not doing security monitoring, if you're not doing resilience and availability monitoring, anytime that you treat something as a black box, you don't really know what's happening in there. And that means that is an unmanaged set of risks. And one of the things I've taught for over 15 years now in our training courses is a PKI doesn't make risk go away. When we think about users being given certificates to get on a VPN or Wi-Fi, the reason we do that is there's a risk in having a user and a password out there. From an organization perspective, we don't know if it's really that user with the username and password, if it's an adversary, who's using it, if 5 people are using it, it's a risk. By giving them a certificate instead, we move all of that risk into our PKI, our CAs, our private keys, our HSMs. It aggregates and consolidates that risk, but you can't destroy that risk. But if I can move all of that risk into my PKI, and I no longer have to worry about each of those individual users and their passwords, I now have to worry about the risk of my PKI. If it's not available, if it's not secure, I'm not doing myself any good other than concentrating where all of those risks are. So when we neglect a PKI, it leads to issues. This is about things like expiry and downtime. One of the top things that people just said. If I allow certificates to expire, if I have CRL expirations, we've been working with a few customers lately that have had CA expirations. They have a certificate lifecycle management tool. They weren't monitoring their CA certificates. When a CA expires, everything it does expires. So there are huge impacts of ignoring that. You can have obviously old, outdated algorithms. We've seen a big move from SHA-1 to SHA-2 many years ago. Now we're dealing with the boogeyman of post-quantum, but not being able to tell what algorithms are in there. Another great example, does your pen test explicitly say, oh, we looked at the symmetric signing key that's used for key archival in our CA? That would have been a great poll from a geeky perspective. How many people know that their CA probably has a symmetric key encipherment process for key archival? And if so, what cryptography is there? Most customers don't know, for instance, Microsoft CAs use triple DES. Most customers would not be very comfortable knowing that triple DES is being used in their PKI. But if you don't know it's there, you could have this outdated information. We obviously have things like rogue certificates, rogue CAs. When the PKI is something that is treated reactively, a pen test found something, let's do something about it. The reactive costs are very expensive, and we talk about this regularly. If you're responding to PKI issues reactively, you're fighting fires, you're having to rebuild, cost of compromise, impact to the business. It's just not the way PKIs are designed to run. And Brad, I'm sure you've seen this kind of stuff over the years.
Yeah, I've seen it. The issue is people are afraid of their PKIs. Once it's up and operational, there's kind of a don't touch it attitude, and that's the kind of the kiss of death. They really need to kind of cultivate it. They need to keep on top of it. They need to keep watching it. They need to learn more about it. I know when we've done assessments, I've been on the web interfaces with Jake, and he will show, ask people to bring up their screens, and then he'll say, okay, can you click on this button? And you can just see the hesitation from the customer going, you really want me to click on that button? Because they're afraid that if they click on some button they haven't clicked on before, that the whole thing is going to collapse. So companies need to get less afraid of their PKI, and that's an education issue. I mean, I've yet to find a company where they've got one or two real experts on staff as it pertains to PKI.
I think that's the value of posture management, which, by the way, we didn't term that coined posture management. Gartner's had a lot of research that they've been doing in this space. Posture management goes across the cybersecurity spectrum. It's just that PKI posture management is the space that we're in, but the same principles are out there. How do we do real-time visibility and monitoring? How do we look for misconfigurations? How do we tell if something that we designed has drifted? We talk to customers a lot of times where they say, I architected this thing. I have no idea what it looks like today. I was talking with a customer yesterday, and they're like, well, I'm the architect and I'm designing this and I'm the deep subject matter expert. Well, it's going to get turned over to the SecOps team and they're going to run it, but they have no way of knowing if things drift or change. The architect doesn't know. So in some ways, even with the security operations team in place, it becomes neglected because there is no one making sure that this stuff is being addressed in real time. And maybe they'll do a pen test a year from now and they'll figure out, oh, we've had some issues. So posture management, if you're doing this in other parts of your organization, or maybe this is where you want to start, is really just about finding out, how do I get this real-time visibility? And it's why we created tools. Is our customers that were using CLM tools were treating their PKIs as black boxes. The CLM vendors treat their PKIs as black boxes. And looking at the poll, it looks like most people have general security tools. You have a SIM system. Maybe you'll have some type of network monitoring tool that does pinging or check to see if a service is running. But those tools, SolarWinds is not going to tell you if you have Spectre Ops. Managed Engine isn't going to tell you if you've got petit potems in your environment. A script that you write and run in your environment, even if it's real time, isn't going to tell you the moment that templates have now introduced security issues. So posture management is really a way of kind of shifting to a different space. The other interesting thing is if you try to use different tools to do what posture management does. So if you take, Spotlight is our delivery in the posture management space, the cost of doing a once a year assessment it is relatively low, and it's less than doing continuous monitoring. But as you start trying to solve the problem of, okay, my pen test isn't as up to date as I'd like, it's once a year, or maybe it's, as some of the people said, no, from a compliance standpoint, okay, what if I do it twice a year, if I do it once a month? If I do it 6 times a year, that becomes really hard. It's a lot of work because a lot of pen tests are very manual. It's a big budget. As you try to move towards that concept of posture management using the wrong tool, like a pen test or assessment, it is a very expensive proposition because now you're moving from something that maybe costs you what, $20,000, $30,000 for a specialized pen test. Well, that's once a year. As you start doing these more and more frequent, your cost gets very high. And then frankly, even if you hired a pen tester and said, we want to do a pen test every day. Oh my God. But just imagine, still, the moment that they're done and they create the report, it's out of date until the next thing that happens. So without changing how organizations think about a security perspective, posture management is changing this. And I see this note from Michael here around the need for a dedicated FTE. And one of the origin things for us is the reason that we got kind of the spotlight points. We didn't really kind of set out initially to create a tool. We kept seeing these security and operational challenges at customers. And it wasn't until I sat there with Jake and I said, what if we just take everyone in the organization and we tried to solve this operational security challenge for one customer? And we realized it would take all of us all day, every day to do this, and it's out of date, and we'd probably be bored silly after a week, right? Humans are not meant to do this type of repetitive work over and over again. It has to be done through tooling and approaches. So as we take this quick time that we have, it always seems to go so quickly, is thinking about one, if you're doing assessments and you're doing pen tests, make sure you know what they're doing for you and what they're not doing for you. I'm going to encourage everyone to make sure that they're having clear conversations with whoever's doing assessments in those pen tests. Are you looking for these specific vulnerabilities? And if you don't work with us today and you're not sure what these Spectre Ops are or Petit Podums, we'd be happy to give you information that you can sit down with your pen tester and say, can you tell me that these 16 vulnerabilities from Spectre Ops aren't here? Like, are you explicitly checking for these things? Or did you just give me a checkbox next to my PKI? So make sure that we're thinking about that. Also make sure that your management, that your decision makers, that your CISO realizes that the pen test is not the way to secure the environment. It's simply a compliance tool. Make sure that you're staying up to date with vulnerabilities and exploits, being able to see what is getting published out there and understanding and identifying how will you find the next Spectre Ops or Petit Podums, the next CVE. We just posted about 2 new CVEs that Microsoft has put out. How do you find those? Or are you just hoping that somebody is going to do that? Or are you just going to wait till your next pen test a year from now and find out, yeah, you've been exposed to this? Make sure that you're not neglecting your PKI. Figure out how you're going to get that visibility. Start reading up on what Gartner and others are talking about from a posture management perspective, what that discipline brings you. And what you'll actually find is it probably makes your job easier, because every time you have to pivot back to the firewall, pivot back to the PKI because it's got an issue or something expired or something's not working. Posture management is about taking care of that grunt work so that you can do the higher level identity work that you should be doing. And then obviously tools like Spotlight are there to fill in that specialized need in PKI space. There are tools that are designed for other spaces that are out there. Brad, anything that you would want to add to the summary here?
No, I think you did a great job as usual, and we're running out of time, so we need to wrap this up and then talk about our next webinar that we're going to be having next month.
Yes, tell us about the May webinar. What do we have coming up next month?
So the next month we're gonna webinar is, I think we're gonna name it Beyond the Firewall. I still think that corporations still view the firewall as the end all be all. They're starting to realize that building a bigger, better, stronger wall around their environment is starting to be a mistake. But organizations are still spending the majority of their IT security budgets on firewalls. I don't blame companies like Palo Alto and Cisco and those for really kind of getting to the executives. I mean, it's one of those products that's called a firewall. It's one of the few things that does what
it's table stakes now. Everyone has to have a firewall. You start there. It's easy to sell. It's easy to position. It's well established. Absolutely. I know I'm kind of an OG in the space. Do you remember the old phrase, the Twinkie approach to security? No, just by having the firewalls, you've got this kind of protective outer layer like a Hostess Twinkie. And then once you get through it, everything's soft on the inside. So I think a lot of what we hear about zero trust is kind of embracing here. It's got to be more than firewalls. It's got to be security in depth. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, so that's going to be the next one. So register early. And if anybody needs more information about what we've talked about today, please reach out to me or to our standard hello at pkisolutions.com, and we will get back to you. So we're at the bottom of the hour. So thank you very much for attending the webinar. Mark, thank you again for your insight and your experience in this space. And we'll talk to all of you soon, I hope.
All right, everyone, have a great April. See you soon.
Thank you.